Welcome to the Photo Flunky Show, episode 99. Today we're going to be taking a look at what makes a photograph interesting. Hi, my name is William Beem.
Hi, my name is William Beem.
And before we get into what makes a photograph interesting, I want to let you know that show notes are going to be available at williambeem.com/episode 99. And you'll find links to subscribe there. Also, we've got a player for our podcast at photoflunky.com. Just go there. You can listen to this show. You can listen to a whole bunch of others. And also, we've got an offer from On One. It is free for you. It's a series of Lightroom presets. They've got some for landscape, some for portraits, and a number of other things. Some are from photographers you may know. So just go ahead and take a look at them. You can get to them easily at williambeem.com/on1LR presets. So ON1LR presets. Like I said, they're completely free, and it wouldn't hurt you to check them out. When we talk about what makes a photograph interesting, there are millions, if not billions, of photographs out there. Some of them are interesting, some of them suck. And what we really want to do is kind of distill what are the elements, really, of interesting photographs.
There are a few, because to be interesting, you have to stand out. And to stand out, well, basically, you can't blend in. You need to be different. And that goes for photographs as well. And there are plenty of ways to achieve this. So I think we're just going to talk about a few of them.
I think we've got 5 things that you can look at. And the reason we wanted to bring this up is when you're doing your composition, or when you're planning for your photograph, or when you see something that looks interesting, these are things that you can ask yourself and help you make the most out of your composition. Because sometimes you'll see something interesting and you get the photograph back, and it's really not
what you thought. Yeah.
It's not what you thought. Maybe you experienced something, but the photograph doesn't capture it. And what we want to do is try and help you understand some of the things that you can think about at the time that you're going to capture, or before, if you're able to plan it out. And I think one of the first ones is, do you have an uncommon or unusual subject?
Yeah, that's a good start. I mean, an interesting subject or something different and usually grabs attention from the outset, whether or not the photograph is checks the boxes to be a good one.
And by uncommon or unusual, we're talking about something that, you just don't see every day, because the stuff you see day by day becomes rather mundane to you. And you're looking for something, even if it's just a little element of your subject, that is somehow different or unusual, something that captures people's interest because they haven't seen it before.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, one of the things that comes to mind is Steve McCurry's photo of an Afghanistan girl, and she has these brilliant green eyes.
Oh, that one, yeah.
Yeah, that. You know the photo I'm talking about. And that's an interesting photo. It's not just because there's someone maybe that has a scarf over her head, and to me, it's really the eyes that are captivating. It's just something I don't see commonly. I see a lot of people with blue eyes or brown eyes, and there's plenty of people with green eyes, but something about the way that photograph got captured, it just really comes out. And
they went and found the woman a few years ago. They went out. It was like this big quest to find the
I remember hearing
child who
something
grew
about
up.
that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing we're talking about. And we're not necessarily talking about a portrait subject. This can work with anything that you're looking at, whether it's a travel photo, it could be your food photography, it could be a landscape, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a street photo, but it's got to be something that has an element that is uncommon or unusual.
Yes.
What do you look for? Like if you're taking your vacation photos, I mean, are you looking for things that you don't normally see, or are you planning them out? How do you typically go about it?
It's not as simple as looking for things that I don't usually see. Obviously, when you're in a different place, you're looking for things that I tend to look more for things that go with that place. So yeah, it would be things that are different, but I'm not thinking different. I try to see things differently to what I assume the common person would, the view that the average person would take on them. Most people shoot things straight on. Most people shoot things in fairly even lights. I'm just talking about every day. I'm not going in, speaking about creative photographers specifically, but there's a tourist shot approach.
Yes.
And that applies wherever you are, because anywhere that you are, even if it's not a tourist location, visitors have been there in the past and they've taken photos, no doubt, because they want to show their story that they were there. So when I'm looking for something different, I usually take it from the approach of different angles, different perspectives, different lighting.
I've noticed that you like your details.
I do.
You get closer to things than most people do.
I do. I like to get really close.
And that's what's really uncommon or unusual for your subject. It's not so much that you're trying to capture the whole grandeur of something. You're looking for something small, but yet it tells you about the whole thing.
Yeah, I want to get right inside.
All right, the next item on our list, the lighting on your subject. And one of the most boring things you can do is have flat, even light. And you know what? Sometimes we talk about for portraits, when you've got cloudy day over there, it's kind of nice because you don't have harsh shadows on somebody. But shadows are useful.
They are. They can accentuate your subject.
They can make the lines really stand out. And some shadows look better than others. It depends upon how sharp the line comes from, shadow to light. And it's not like there is one good thing, like, oh, this shadow is good and that shadow is bad. It really depends upon your subject. Sometimes that harsh shadow really works very well for you.
Yes.
And I guess this is subjective, but I remember the advice that I've got from Joe McNally. He said this at some of the conferences before, and he got this from one of his mentors. If you want to make something look interesting, don't light all of it.
That makes a lot of sense because you've got no contrast. And if you don't have contrast, what's one of the first things that most people hit, that one of the first sliders you hit when you go into Photoshop
You
or
want to add
Lightroom
contrast.
is to add some contrast in a raw photograph. I mean, it's not the first stop, but it's among them. It's certainly in that first little set. If you have to add contrast in post-processing, I think that's a sign that you should be paying attention to contrast when you're taking the photo.
One of the things that comes to mind for me is that your eye is drawn toward the brightest spot. In other words, where there's light, that's where your eye is going to go.
Yes.
If everything is at the same level of illumination, you don't have a brightest spot to go to. So your eye just kind of wanders wherever.
It roams.
And it might roam right off the page. But if you've got some place where the light is just drawn out a little bit more than the rest, and if you've got some shadows that are hiding a few things, or at least, keeping them from being a distraction, that gives you some interest inside of your photograph.
It does, and it puts some mystery behind. And you eliminate some distractions when you have the light on the focal point of the subject, where you want the attention, because the lack of light or the shadows, as it were, on the other areas, let them sort of pale into the background.
One of the photographers I think is really a master of this is Tim Wallace. If you don't know him, he's a UK-based automotive photographer, and he goes out for the big brands. I mean, if you're looking at the Ferraris or Aston Martins, whatever, the big European brands are, he's shooting those, and his photographs are just wonderful examples of how to use light and shadow, and really draw out color. And I guess that's another one. We talk about light and shadow, but another one is color and desaturation kind of adds to the same thing.
Yes.
You want the part that's supposed to be interesting to show up, and the rest of it that's not so interesting to kind of fade back.
Absolutely. And the color, the color temperature as well, that sets the mood.
Yes. And speaking of mood, we kind of want to go on to the next one. What is the message or story involved in your photograph?
Well, that's something where I have to pay attention because I do capture details. When you don't have the big picture, that story needs to be pretty clear. Although details can give you the more intimate side of a story, you can also lose the context of the story if you don't present it properly. And a lot of things come into that. It's composition, it's how you shoot it, it's where you shoot it, it's the lighting, the color, and everything as well.
I think this is an example where you can have something that maybe isn't an uncommon or unusual subject and use that detail to bring out the story. And the most common example I can think of are wedding rings. So in other words, a photographer who's going to shoot a wedding is going to get detail shots. They're going to put the wedding rings together and take a shot there in an interesting place. Yeah. They're going to take a shot of maybe the wedding dress hanging or on a hanger. And they're going to look for those details. And that tells you a story. Somebody's getting ready to get married. There's two people who've made a commitment. You don't even see them in the photograph, but when you see the rings together, whether it's on a piano top or in a book or whatever, it tells you a story. And it's part of the elements that make interesting photos. You may not necessarily have all of these together, but the more you can combine together, I think really does help you create interesting photographs.
That's very true. I mean, I do that all the time. I'd see at least once or twice a week with shoes. There are shoes in my photos, and it's not necessarily the whole shoe. Sometimes it's just the bow on the lace or the ends of the lace in the corner of the shoe, kind of next to something else. Never really zoomed in on it. But there's a shoe there, and that tells my story.
Yeah, because in your case, these are running shoes, and you've got messages even on your shoes.
I do.
Not so much the message of the photo, but you've got messages on your shoes. And it tells people, particularly since you're into endurance running, it tells other runners, you're committed to this, you're interested in this.
I am committed to it,
you're, you've been out running or getting ready to go out running, whichever shoes they are, because some of yours are old and some of them are brand new.
Yeah, I've got lots of shoes.
You have a plethora of shoes.
I've taken photos of all of them.
Right. Number 4 on our list is, does the subject work with the background? Typically, I like to say eliminate as much stuff as you can from the background, but that's not necessarily always the case. Well, I want to say, does the subject work with a background? Sometimes a busy background tells something about your subject.
Oh, yeah. A person standing in the middle of a crowd. I'm sorry, I'm using running as an example, but this is what I do. You take a race day photo and you turn around. I like to sometimes turn around when you're in the starting corral and you turn around to the back, and that's when you see the sea of people. I've usually just got a phone. Well, I've always just got a phone with me because I don't like to run with stuff.
No, it's kind of hard to run with a Nikon.
It really is. I lift it above my head and kind of get a shot over the crowd. These are not great photos, but just seeing all the people there, or even holding up your medal like close to the phone after, and then having the crowd in the background with the festivities going on, that also tells a story. So yeah, those are busy backgrounds that tell the story of your subject.
This is something you see on Instagram quite a bit, and people want to tell the story of where they are at a certain place. And our example in Orlando is usually Walt Disney World.
Yep.
People will like to hold up something in front of Cinderella Castle, for example.
Yeah.
And, I've done that. I've gone out there and get my Mickey bar and hold that up. Or you've done it with some of your, what do you call those little chains?
I've got a Disney charm bracelet, and over the years I've collected, I don't know, more charms than are probably supposed to fit on there.
But I think of that, like in that particular example with Cinderella Castle, I think of that as an anchor point. It's in the background. It may not even be in focus, and something else is in front. It's a busy shot, but at the same time, it's supposed to be busy.
Yeah.
Your subject is clearly in focus in front of it, and then there's a busy background behind it, but it works.
It does. And I mean, you can do the same thing with something with a crowd just before the fireworks. You kind of want to capture that everybody's mesmerized by or waiting in anticipation with this for this show.
I know what you mean. I've got one I really like, is because somebody's got their mouse ears on, but instead of the traditional black ones, they've got some yellow ones, and it just really stands out amongst everybody else in the sea of people that are in front of them. And, that was kind of my subject, but that actually leads us into the next one. And number 5 was, you want to make sure that you've got an interesting angle or some perspective. And by that, we're talking about the depth of spatial relationship. You want to make sure that you have a foreground, a middle, and a background, if that's what suits your photograph.
Yeah. Now, the type of lens you use can also come into that because of compression.
Oh, absolutely. Because if you're shooting from, well, you know what? Let's go ahead and use that Disney example. And you're looking down Main Street again. Do you want everything spaced out, or do you want to show the crowd kind of compressed together and bring your background a little bit higher, a little bit larger in your frame?
They're both very effective, but they serve different purposes. And I guess it depends on the feel you want to create.
One of the times when I used that was when I was in Savannah, Georgia. Just outside of Savannah, there's the Wormslow Estate, and they have this wonderful dirt road lined by oak trees. And I got there, I was taking photos with my 24-70, and it just didn't feel right because the trees in the photograph looked like they were spaced very far apart.
Yeah.
I actually left. I thought, man, I'm just not getting the shot. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And then it dawned on me. I went back around, pulled out my 7200, I zoomed in a bit more, and then all of a sudden those trees came closer together. And that's what gave you the feel that you're really there
in the thick of these trees.
Because it eliminated all of this sparseness in between the trees.
It really does.
And then it kind of brought you in there, and you were in the thick of the trees. You were just going down. You got the leading line with the dirt road, and then you've got the oak trees on both sides and the canopy of the trees coming over the cross. And it really changed the photograph by having that spatial relationship. And, if you could have changed the angle a little bit, I could have gotten down on my belly on the road. I could have gotten up maybe a little bit higher. This is one of the reasons why I think a lot of people are getting into drone photography these days, because it gives them yet another angle to view their subject.
Yeah.
Those are the 5 things that we've got in mind as far as elements of interesting photos. If you can think about this, an uncommon or unusual subject, something people don't see every day. For example, if you live in New York or Chicago, you definitely don't see a dirt road lined with oak trees every day.
No, but if you find one, you got to shoot it.
Yes.
See, now everybody who's listened to the show has to go and take some awesome photos and share them with us. No pressure.
No pressure.
We're waiting.
And also remember, number 2, shadows instead of flat light. I see a lot of portraits these days with flat light and flat processing, and I got to tell you, I just go right past them. There's nothing interesting to me at all about that.
There's no depth.
I understand flat light for like a catalog shoot. We did that a few months ago with one of the models we know, and that's exactly what she'd requested, because you're showcasing a product rather than trying to create a work of art.
Yes, absolutely. I do that as well.
But what's interesting to me about a photograph is looking at it as a work of art. And number 3, we mentioned having a message or a story. Number 4 was, does the subject work with a background? A lot of times I want to say get everything out of your background that doesn't belong. And I still think that's good advice, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your background has to be empty. Sometimes you want something back there that works with or supports the message or the story.
Yeah.
So it works with your photograph. And finally, choose an interesting angle, something different than just standing there, 5 or 6 feet tall, whatever your height is, and taking a shot, the same angle that everybody sees.
Absolutely.
So, all right, that's all we have today on what makes a photograph interesting. We wanted to give you one little note that we're going to be off next week. We're having a good time doing stuff, and we're not going to be recording a podcast, but we will be back the following week. If you're listening to this as they come out, don't be surprised when there's no episode next week, and we'll be back later on.
And we'll make up for it.
Thank you very much for listening to the Photo Flunky Show. Again, this is episode 99. So if you want to see the show notes, head over to williambeem.com/episode 99. And you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play Music, and a few other sites there. And of course, remember, we're not going to see you again next week, but we hope to see you again after that. Take care.